If you've been watching the news lately, you may be aware of some things happening in the states of New York and Virginia, both of which have taken a spotlight concerning our nation's ongoing issue regarding abortion. In New York, a few weeks ago, they passed a law that said that a mother could abort her child up to the 40th week of her pregnancy, which of course is term. Whereas before it had been before the final trimester. Now it is up to the very last moment before the baby is born, the baby could be aborted. And so that obviously naturally raised a great outcry by those who are against the process of abortion. And then very recently in Virginia, they debated and eventually tabled for now a law that would have allowed a mother to abort her child, and we put abort there in quotation marks, after the baby was born. And there's a quote that's been circulating on Facebook, and I'm going to read not only the portion that has been circulated, but the entire quote, just so we can be absolutely fair. This quote comes from the governor of Virginia, and I'll begin really where the context should begin, where the governor says, quote, "When we talk about third trimester abortions, these are obviously done with consent of the mother, with the consent of the physicians, more than one physician, by the way. And it's done in cases where there may be severe deformities. There may be a fetus that's non-viable. So in this particular example, if a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered, the infant would be kept comfortable, the infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and family desired, and then a discussion would ensue between physician and mother. So I think this really was blown out of proportion, and what he's referring to at the end there, what's blown out of proportion is the outcry that sparked as a result of people reading the bill that was being discussed, and as I say, has now been tabled. But from the governor's position, his defense of it is that this would only be done in cases where the fetus, in his word, was considered non-viable or had deformities. Now, he's being very vague with his wording. I don't know how he would define or how the law would define deformities or non-viability. I would assume non-viability means the baby's going to die soon after birth. And in that case, according to this bill and based on his words, what the plan would then be to deliver the child, put the baby, I would presume, on a table somewhere nearby, and then instead of sucking out the mucus and things that's always in a baby after they're born so they can start breathing in oxygen for the first time, instead of doing that, they would allow this newborn baby to sit and to begin to slowly suffocate while a conversation is held between the mother and her doctors whether or not she wants to keep this baby who has now been born. In fact, I think it's very telling, among other things, that he uses the word fetus to describe the baby before it's born and then infant to describe the baby after, in the context of whether or not we're going to kill this child after it's been born. When you can imagine people who are against abortion, who recognize that life begins at conception, having problem with that law. All abortion laws you're going to find opponents of, but in this one in particular, it was so starkly outrageous that you are basically advocating giving birth to a child, deciding whether or not after birth if you want to kill it or not. That is the reason why we're having this discussion right now.
And what we want to do with this video today is to be able to provide to you the biblical response to this. This is not a political video, or we don't want to cause any strife between anybody or anything like that. What we want to do is provide you what the Bible says, what God's position is on the sanctity of life. We encourage communication, we encourage comments. However, if there are any comments that are of the political nature or anything that says vote this way or vote this way because of this, those kinds of comments will absolutely be removed from this video. We want to be able to have a biblical conversation, because that's really what's going to determine our standard of life, how we are going to be pleasing to God, how we're going to live our life as Christians. It's based upon the Bible. It's not about a political stance one way or the other.
Yeah, the Republican and Democrat parties do not define where life begins or how and when life can be taken. God has defined that, as Alex is going to talk about in just a second. God is the giver of life and the taker away of life. It is not for the Republicans or the Democrats to decide that. So if you cannot comment on this subject, and if you cannot respond to this subject without relying on your political viewpoint, then you don't need to comment at all. Because if we can't provide a Bible answer to this and all the other issues that are plaguing the world, if we can't provide a Bible answer then we don't need to be in the Bible business, not the Bible believing business or the Bible preaching business. If your first instinct is to say, well, what does my political viewpoint tell me? Then that's your God. And that's a much different problem that we'll address at another time. This is about life, and life predates the country of America, the United States.
Yeah, just last week I wrote an article for our Daily Bread here at North Heights and sent it on Facebook as well about how life is precious. You know, I'm a big Star Trek fan. You are as well. And one of the things that I've always loved about Star Trek, even with all the liberal views that they have on a lot of issues, conservatively, Star Trek is always taking this great approach to life. They'll risk the ship, they'll risk their crew to provide the chance that life may exist and may continue on. And so I've always enjoyed that very much. So in that article, and you're free to read that, it's still available online. It's dealing with how life is precious, and life is precious no matter who they are. And the reason is because God is the creator of life. He spoke it into existence from the very beginning of time. And if he is the creator of life, then he deems it as something that is very precious. So we start off with that God is the creator of life. And therefore, if God is the creator of life, it must be precious to him.
Yeah. There are a lot of places you can go in the Bible to talk around this subject, but it is fortunate that there are some places in the Bible that directly speak to this subject. You wouldn't think about it. You wouldn't imagine the subject of abortion would have such a specific Bible counterpart, but there is a specific Bible text, more than one, that you can go to. In fact, I imagine the first one that I would think of would be in Genesis chapter 21. Alex, why don't you read Genesis 21, verse 24?
Okay, it says, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe.
So that verse, again, that's Exodus 21:24. It's in the context of God giving the law to Israel and providing them with the framework for their national government. This is the law that's going to guide them that just happens to come from God at Mount Sinai. And in the midst of that, God makes a statement. It's right here in the verse that we just read. It is probably the most famous verse that summarizes the law of Moses. I mean, if you think about what it was the Old Testament God like, what was the Old Testament law like, most people in their mind, they think it was the eye for an eye law. It's about justice and equality. If I take your eye, I lose my eye. That's justice. That's equality. That's fairness. So if I do something, something else is going to happen to me of an equal value. But the context of this statement is remarkable. Go back just a couple of verses, Alex. Read 22 and 23. It
says, when men strive together and hit a pregnant woman so that her children come out, but there is no harm, the one who hit her shall surely be fined, as the woman's husband shall impose on him, and he shall pay as the judges determine.
Let me just pause right there. So what Moses is saying here on behalf of God is, if two men are getting into a fight, as two men sometimes do, and there's a pregnant woman nearby, and she's maybe 9 months or 8 months pregnant, she's soon to deliver, but she hasn't yet, and in the course of their jostling and their fighting, she gets maybe knocked over or something happens, and she's as a result of the jolting, she goes into labor. It happens. You know, pregnant woman falls out of bed, suddenly she goes into labor. Well, here you have a fight between two men, and they foolishly run into her, and she gets to where she has to deliver a child. But as the first verse that he read says, there's no harm done. The baby is delivered, everybody's fine. He just has to pay a fine, right?
Right.
What's the next verse say? It
says, but if there is harm, then you shall pay life for life.
Now, just the first part of that verse, you might think, well, how do you define harm? God defines harm, because he says right after that, you pay life for life, which means you give your life because of what you did to harm this child. Well, how much did I harm the child? I took the child's life. That's the context, because that's fairness and that's justice. And that's why right after that, God says, eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, harm for harm. If you hurt someone, you are hurt of an equal measure. If you take someone's life and they're an innocent party, we're not talking about someone who's a convicted murderer. We're talking about someone who's innocent, and you took their life because of your recklessness, that it is your life that is lost. You lose your life to make up for taking their life. Now, that's how God views life, because here is a life in the womb of a mother. And because of your recklessness, you caused this woman to have her child die. Her child dies. And so you must give your life for that life. Now, I know we don't live by the old law of Moses, but this is not about the law. This is about the principle of life and how God views life. He says this child is alive. That doesn't change when the law changes. That's just the nature of God as a creator. He defines life, and he says this child is alive. You take this child's life, you lose yours. That's pretty clear, I think. Don't you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's very clear. And you know what's interesting about this is there's a lot of arguments that people will come up with. Say, well, what about in this scenario? If this happens to a woman, maybe she's raped or maybe there's incest. What about in that case? Should we be able to abort that baby out of that? Well, I have a hard time understanding why we think that if someone rapes another person, that somehow this innocent baby needs to give its life in order to cause the justice to occur in everybody else's life. It doesn't make any sense at all that one life is taken because of this other action. What I would think is if someone was to rape a woman and she becomes pregnant, it seems like the person that did the raping would need to be the person that pays the penalty of that action, not the little innocent party that's in all of this.
Who's getting punished? Why are you punishing the child for the sin of the grown-up? Punish the grown-up. In fact, that's the lesson that we learned from Exodus 21. And that's really what you're talking about is we're trying to find what scenario am I okay with allowing a child to die, or a fetus, however you want to define it, allow a child to die so that I can have my convenient life. You're basically valuing your life over the child's life. And that's basically the foundation of abortion is this is why your life is more valuable than their life, and these are the scenarios in which you can kill this life to preserve your own the way you want it. You can live your life comfortably, and they'll die to pay for that. Your life is more valuable than theirs. But the lesson we learn from Exodus 21 is this grown man causes this child to die, and that grown man gives his life. God sees them as equal. The life of a grown man and the life of an unborn child are equal to the God who made them both.
Yeah. And whether you kill a little baby or you kill a 30-year-old or you kill an 80-year-old, life is precious and it's wrong no matter what.
Right.
It's wrong no matter what. So the biggest problem that we have is this definition of terms. People say, well, an infant is someone who has been born while a fetus is still in the womb. I don't see that. The Bible is very clear that this word for baby or this word for children is both in the womb and outside of the womb. It's the same. One passage that I love very much, I've been reading through the Bible this year, and I got through Genesis 25 several days ago. And here in Genesis 25, Isaac is praying to the Lord on behalf of his wife. This is verse 21. It says, Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. And the Lord answered him, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. So now Rebekah is pregnant. Then it says this, verse 22. But the children struggled together within her. And she said, if it is so, why then am I this way? And so then she went to inquire of the Lord. So here, this term that is used right here in this Hebrew, this word children, is this word ben in the Hebrew. And that is a word that also is translated sons. And this word is used in the womb here with Rebekah's children, which later become Jacob and Esau. And so these two babies, these two children, these two sons are defined in the same way in the womb and outside of the womb. I love the fact that she says, listen, these children are struggling within her. So somehow she knew something was different about this pregnancy. What was really different is that she had two children, sons, babies inside of her. And they were babies inside of her, and then later on, they're babies outside of her as well.
I think it's very disingenuous, especially in light of this Virginia bill, which it may have been tabled, but it shows you the heart of the person who would advocate abortion and how they view life and not life. Because the old argument used to be, if it's in the womb, it's not alive. If it's out of the womb, it's alive. But that's clearly not the case anymore, when now we're calling something abortion when it involves a child who's already been born. And once you get to that point, once you cross that threshold of delivery, of birth, it doesn't matter if we're talking about a child born 30 seconds ago or a child born 30 years ago. A life born, no matter when, is alive. I'm saying you're alive before birth. But if you want to use the old abortion argument that life begins at birth, well, then why do you have these advocates for abortion now arguing that you can abort after birth? It's not even grammatically correct. To abort something is to stop something before it begins, but you're allowing the child to be born and then trying to kill it and call it abortion. It's dangerous, and it's sloppy grammar, and it's certainly shameful.
Well, another passage that I want to bring up that kind of talks about this definition of terms is also in Luke, where the babies of where Mary visits Elizabeth, and here in verse 41 of Luke chapter 1, actually, it says, "And it came about that when Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby leaped in her womb. Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit, and she cried out with a loud voice and said, Blessed among women are you, and blessed is the fruit of your womb. And how has it happened to me that the mother of my Lord should come to me? For behold, when the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the baby leaped in my womb for joy." So here is this baby, which we know is John the Baptist, is Jesus' cousin. When Mary, who has Jesus in her womb, and Elizabeth, who has John there, when they get together, these babies leap. And that word, that baby, is the same word in the Greek as infant or as toddler. And so before they're born or even after they're born, we refer to them as babies. And that's the case even in our own language today. I would, if I saw a pregnant lady, I would say, "Oh, when is your baby due?" Now, you don't want to do that to just anybody. You want to make sure that they're pregnant. But you would say that. You would say, "Hey, when's your baby due?" And you would say that, "Oh, let me hold your baby." So the terminology is the same, even in our own language. Before they're born and after they're born, it's a baby. It's an infant.
Yeah.
Not just a collection of cells that is
Right.
easily discarded out of convenience.
Yeah, that's, as you were saying, that same word "baby" is used in the next chapter when the
Yeah.
angels are telling the shepherds, "You'll find the baby wrapped in swaddling clothes and lying in a manger." Well, at that point, Jesus has been delivered. The angel uses the same word. The angel of God, the messenger of God, describes an unborn and a born child in the exact same way.
So really there, it's God that's defining that
Yeah.
for us in His Holy Scriptures. That
Once again, God
a baby,
does define it.
Yeah, a baby before it's born is a baby. A baby after it's born is a baby. It's the same
Right.
thing.
And as you were saying, it's funny how inconsistent, it's sad how inconsistent that we are with our terminology. Only when we're discussing the issue of abortion do we refer to the unborn as a fetus. Even abortionists, when they have a sister who becomes pregnant, they don't say, "When's your fetus due?" They say, "When's your baby due?" We use that word, but we don't really mean it when it's convenient to us. If a person murders a pregnant woman, he gets double the sentence. He gets double homicide charge. We recognize in all these different contexts that an unborn is still alive and is considered a baby until it becomes convenient to kill it, and then we just conveniently choose to call it a fetus that's not really alive. Well, convenience only goes so far, and it goes nowhere with God.
Now, let me play a little bit of devil's advocate here, Matthew, because sometimes people say, well, wasn't it the God of the Old Testament that ordered some deaths of infants and babies? How do we answer that question?
Yeah, well, it's 1 Samuel 15. In fact, let's just read it. Look at 1 Samuel 15. I think it's verse number 3. So, again, what he's saying is, let's look at it from the perspective of the person who would be pro-abortion. And here we are, from our perspective, we are anti-abortion. We are against the death of the unborn. And we're trying to say it is not God's way. But then they come back and say, well, doesn't God kill babies? So 1 Samuel 15, I think it's verse 3.
Yeah, it says, "Now go and strike Amalek, and utterly destroy all that he has, and do not spare him, but put to death both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey."
Now, it doesn't concern the unborn, but it doesn't matter. He still says infant. And I think we would all agree, if I kill an infant, it's just as shameful as if I kill an unborn child. So what's the argument there? Well, I would say there's a couple of things to consider. First of all, just to show the insincerity of probably that argument, are you for killing babies or are you not for killing babies? Because you're trying to tell me that it's wrong for God to order the death of man, woman, and child, but it's okay for you to kill a child when it's convenient. You see, that's very inconsistent. So pick one. Pick a lane. Are we for killing babies or not for killing babies? Now, on the other hand, I would argue God is not within the wrong here. God is not inappropriate for him to say, kill man, woman, and child, even infant. Because God, and God alone, is judge, jury, and executor. God and God alone creates life, and God alone has the right to destroy life. God describes himself and commits actions that I am simply not allowed to have as a description or an action for myself. God is a jealous God. I'm not allowed to be jealous. It's against the law to be jealous, and yet God says, I'm a jealous God. He can be jealous, and God can murder, if you want to use that word. God can kill even man, woman, or child, because God is the executor. Yeah. And God sends Saul to go do his bidding, but it's God who's the one giving the order.
And God had done that all throughout history, really. If you think about from the very beginning when wickedness was spread all over the world, God used that flood to be able to purge those that were wicked.
There were babies in the flood. You have
Absolutely.
to know. Yeah.
And also with the rebellion of Korah, here the
Yep.
earth opens
Opens
up,
up.
swallows up all these people. Why does this happen? Well, it's God's control. It's His prerogative to be able to make those determinations. We don't have that right to be able
Right.
to do that.
And you want to say, well, that's hypocritical. No, because I'm not the one killing and then not killing on my own whims. It's a hypocrite if I was the one doing it. God is the master, the lawmaker, and the life giver and life taker. He is judge, jury, and executor, and not me. And that's the problem with abortion, is they put themselves in the role of judge, jury, and executor. Whereas they say, we don't think this life is viable. This child will only live a few minutes out of the womb. Okay, that's a few minutes that he is allowed to have, or she's allowed to have, by the gift of life that God gave that child. It's not your place to be the judge and to make the judgment that this child doesn't deserve those few minutes, or even those few seconds. It's not your place to be the jury and to decide this person is now going to die, and to be the executioner and to kill that child. That is the role of God. So if you want to play that game, at least be consistent. Are you for killing babies or are you not? Because God is the judge, not me. I'm the one who's consistent, not the abortionist. I wonder if abortion is murder, and if we're going to make the claim, as I think we both agree, abortion is murder, then what about when people say, well, what about the life of the mother? What about when there is the circumstances where if we allow the pregnancy to continue, the mother's life might be on the line? What do we do in that scenario? How are we going to be consistent with that?
Well, for me, you have to think about still going back to the idea of that life is precious, and if you are in a situation where the mother's life is still on the line, I know of mothers who were nervous about their own pregnancy and that had to struggle through all of that, and still those precious mothers would go ahead and give anything to hold that baby at the end of it. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. But still, the big picture is that God is in control of every situation, and He can choose to do what He wants to with whatever situation there is. I don't think that we should ever say, you know what, here's this situation, and so it's okay to murder.
Yeah.
I just don't see that being consistent with what God teaches us in His scriptures.
Yeah, because I think if we're going to make the claim, and if the Bible teaches us, I think it does, that this is life, then there should be no justification. There should be no circumstances where we get to, out of convenience, say, well, this child has to die. And it is still a convenience. Well, it's my life. Okay, but it's also their life. And if we're going to say that's life, then it doesn't matter. You can't play the role of judge to say my life now has more value than this life. Life is life. And you don't get to make that decision because you're not the judge, the jury, or the executioner. Yeah. Once you make the claim that it's life and you want to live by it, then you have to be consistent. And that's really the biggest problem that I have with all these laws is they're not consistent. They won't define where is life and make that determination because it's not a matter of opinion. Right. It just is. It's a matter of science. Right. Life is life.
It comes down to how do we view this potential of life, and if we take that life from someone, it is taking the blood of an innocent person, and I know that is certainly contrary to what God's Word teaches us. There's this one passage that I wanted to share with everyone in Proverbs that just really helps us to define some things that God is absolutely, totally against. Of course, I had it marked. Here it is. Proverbs chapter 6, and starting verse 16. It says, there are 6 things which the Lord hates. Yes, there are 7. So one of the neat things about the Bible is when they want to bring emphasis to something, really bring it home, it'll say something like that. 6, but really there's 7. So he really wants to make this very important and to stand out to us as we read it. He says this, yes, there are 7 things that are an abomination to him. Number 1, haughty eyes, lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that run rapidly to evil, a false witness who utterly lies, and one who spreads strife among brothers. So all these terrible things that are there, and right there in the middle of it is this phrase, and hands that shed innocent blood. And I think we could make a case that each one of these 7 things that are listed here plays right into this issue of abortion.
Yeah.
So, haughty eyes, how would you put that into the issue of abortion?
Well, I mean, that's the person who says, it's my body, I'll do what I want with it.
Yeah.
When it's not your body. There's another body that happens to be in your body, but it's not your body.
And to define haughty, because that's not a terminology.
Arrogant, presumptuous, you know, boastful about your arrogance.
Yeah. So it's my body, I'll do what I want to with it.
Mm-hmm. Even if that means killing a child.
Yeah. Okay, so next one, lying tongue. How do we play that one into abortion?
Well, that's the person who says it's not alive, it's just a clump of cells. Well, you don't get to define that. And whether you know it or not, you're a liar when you say that.
Okay, so then the hands that shed innocent blood, that should be obvious.
That's the doctor who performs the terrible procedure.
Okay, and then number 4, a heart that devises wicked plans.
Well, you have a law that allows abortion under extreme circumstances when the baby is only just been conceived, and then a few generations later, one generation later, since Roe v. Wade, it's 1973, one generation later, we are talking about letting the baby be born and then killing it. You see how we have run from one terrible sin to the most gross extreme version of it so far.
Okay, and then feet that run rapidly to evil.
Right. What was the one just before that?
A heart that devises wicked plans.
Yeah, so both of them work here. The devising is the constant changing of the laws and coming up with new ways to make it easier to perform abortion, and then running to do those terrible things. Yeah, the idea of just almost taking joy in it. In fact, there was even a law that was being debated in the Virginia House that would have protected snails. At the same time, they were debating the law that would allow you to murder a child right after it's born. We rush to defend things that don't matter, and we rush to kill things that do.
Really good point. And then the 6th one, a false witness who utters lies.
Well, I would use that in the same way the previous one was mentioned, which is
tongue.
We lie. We say it doesn't matter. It's just it's not really alive. Don't worry. That reminds me of the doctor and the people who are supposed to be trying to help people who are actually trying to find ways to convince the mother it's okay to kill her child.
And then one who spreads strife among brothers.
Well, we said this at the beginning of the video. This is a very controversial topic, and I hate to see my brethren fight over things under the realm of politics, when if we all agreed on the Bible, we wouldn't argue over it.
Yeah. Anyway, I just think that's a really good way of looking at it, and here it says that these are things that God hates and are abomination to Him. This is something that if we'll just do what the Bible says and we'll let the Bible be our standard, it would solve so much. It really would. So what do you think? What do I do as a Christian? What can I do? What if I go to church with somebody that's had an abortion? Or what if I've had an abortion? What's my response?
Yeah, I think this may be the most important part of it, because as Christians, our mindset has to be toward forgiveness. Our mindset has to be toward helping people. And that means helping people who have performed or have had abortions performed on them. We care about life, and we want to see life not be killed. And nevertheless, life is being killed. Almost every time I snap my fingers, a life is killed. What can I do as a Christian? Well, I can be forgiving. I can be loving. I can pray for the lawmakers who legalize this, that they will stop the lawmaking. I can pray for the doctor who performs it, that he will stop, that he'll follow the Hippocratic Oath that he once promised to uphold. I can pray for the mother and be there for her and give her the encouragement to get out of her sin. And if you want to say, well, that's a horrible person, I can never be kind to that person, how could I ever sit with that person and sing and take the Lord's Supper with that person? I would remind you that the Apostle Paul shed innocent blood. That we all of us have done sin in the sight of God, and all of us deserve death, not life. All of us deserve judgment, not mercy, and yet God grants it because all of us can be forgiven. So we should extend that forgiveness.
So it's a message of hope, really. There's nothing that you could have done that's so terrible that God's grace cannot reach out to you and save you. Even of the most terrible of sins,
right,
there's still hope for you.
We don't ever want to give the impression that if you've had an abortion, you're not welcome here.
Yeah.
Everybody is welcome to come to Christ. That's the beauty of the gospel. It is for all, not just the convenient ones, but for the ones that is hard to let go of the sin they've committed and come to Christ. Because He wants those sins, because He's the only one who can take them away.
Yeah. So what can I do as a Christian today? So what are some things that I can do right now to battle this issue and to defeat Satan and his plot to harm us? Well, one of the things that we can do is begin to defend, to help those that are helpless. Let's do all that we can to help those mothers and pray for those mothers and give those mothers counsel and help to make good decisions in their lives, no matter what the case is. I don't care what scenario it is. There's good help that's there, and we need to be, as Christians, we need to be the ones that are providing that kind of help and hope for people that are caught in any kind of situation that is terrible. There's always hope for them, and we need to be people that are constantly doing that. And like what Matthew said, we need to constantly be in prayer for mercy to be extended and forgiveness to people, and we need to be praying constantly for morals to be in line with God's word in our nation and in our world. I don't care what they are, any kind of morals. That's what we want to stand up for, whether it's the issue of abortion, whether it's an issue of homosexuality, or any kind of right and wrong situation. We want to pray for good morals here in this country and globally, because this message that we have is the message of the gospel, and it is a message of forgiveness and grace and redemption. And that's the message that we want to preach here at North Heights and to the whole world. There's still hope for you no matter what.
This is a difficult subject. It's not easy. We talked about this for the past couple of days. We've talked about how we're going to approach this and how we need to address this. We both knew this is a subject that we need to touch on because everyone's talking about it. It's a biblical issue. It's a life and death issue. But that doesn't make it an easy issue to discuss. In fact, that's what makes it so difficult.
Yeah. Matter of fact, there were in this video, or before we shot this video, there were times where we would just be discussing it, and I would get emotional about it because and not that I've had to deal with an abortion in my life or anything like that, but I know of people that have done that, and I know of people that have struggled with this, and know of people that are trying to figure it all out. And it's just such a travesty and such a terrible thing that we've got to deal with that it merits that kind of emotion. And so we understand that, we sympathize with that, but it's also one that we have to be willing to go ahead and go to the Bible to find our answers about.
Yeah, that is the most important part of this, which is God has given the answer. This is not our opinion. This is not our take on the subject. This is simply us telling you this is what God has said. And so it doesn't matter what you think or what I think or what I wish or what I want. It matters what has God said. And what God has said is law. And we have to follow what God has said. Whether that's easy or hard, we have to follow what God has said because He's the master.
Yeah. I do want to say that if anybody has any questions or if anybody has anything that they want to talk to us about, you can contact us. You can message us on Facebook. You can send us a text message. You can call us. You can meet us up here at the church building or wherever, and we'll be glad to talk to you further about this issue or just to study the Bible with you because we're open books.
We want to help.
We want to help.
Thank you for paying attention to the video. We hope to see you this Sunday. We'll meet you at worship at 10 o'clock. God bless. Yeah. Okay, here's his full quote. I'm going to start from the beginning. When we talk about third trimester abortions, those are done with the consent of, obviously, the mother, with the consent of the physicians, more than one physician, by the way. And it's done in cases where there may be severe deformities, there may be a fetus that's non-viable. So in this particular example, if a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what happened. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and family desired, and then a discussion would ensue between physicians and the mother. So I think this was really blown out of proportion. So his position is basically, we're dealing with a case where the fetus, he says, the baby, is having deformities or maybe non-viable, which we will interpret to mean the baby's not going to live much longer anyway. In that case, the infant is delivered. Notice his verbiage changes from fetus to infant, because in his mind, when you leave the womb, you're now an infant. Fine, okay, I'll even give you that. I'll concede that for the moment. An infant has now been born. So the infant would be kept alive until the family and the mother and the physicians discuss what to do. Well, in the context is to abort or not abort. Well, the word abort means to stop before it has begun. The infant has been born. It's begun. So you're really being very sloppy with your grammar.
Let me ask this.
Yeah.
He says resuscitate.
Yeah, and I don't know if that was just bad word choice on his part, like he used the word and forgot what it meant, because it's dead and then you bring it back to life. That's resuscitate. So I think, in the context, I think what he's trying to say is the baby is simply kept alive. Because right after that he says, if that's what the family desired, and then a discussion would ensue between physicians and the mother. So, I mean, once you killed a child, you can't bring back to life an aborted child. They're pretty thorough with those things, with the details we're not going to get into. So I imagine the only thing he could have meant was kept alive until you decide what to do with the thing.
Yeah, I think he meant intubated. You know how?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's probably what they mean. It's where they keep someone breathing.
Right.
The baby would be kept breathing, kept comfortable. That would be more appropriate in the context of what he's saying.
Right.
Resuscitate means they're not breathing, and we can resuscitate.
Right.
To bring them back into breathing.
Now it's possible that's what he means. In that case, they deliver the child.
It's not breathing.
Yeah, because no baby's breathing when it's first born. They don't do anything to it.
Oh, yeah.
They bring it out and it's just there dying.
The baby butt.
Yeah, but they're not going to do that. It's just there and the baby is dying, suffocating.
Right.
And then you
Matter of
discuss
fact, they
what
suck
we're
out
do.
all the.
Yeah,
were you there when your kids were born?
Yes, and it's disgusting.
They get it all going. They kickstart it.
So then I think now that I think about it, that's what he means. What he's saying is, okay, we're going to deliver this child. We're going to set him on the table, and it's going to be suffocating and dying without air. And we'll talk to the mother. Do you want this child to live or die? And if she says let it die, then they just don't do anything and let this born infant just suffocate and die. But if you want to bring it to life, then we'll resuscitate. We'll suck out its mucus and stuff, and we'll bring it to life, and here it is. So it's post-birth choice of life or death. Yeah. So that's the slippery slope. At what point do you say to a child, okay, I no longer want you to live, so I'm going to stop giving you oxygen?
Does it make you mad? I get mad.
It makes me mad. It makes me more sad. And not even sad like weepy sad, but just like Jeremiah sad. Like, this is the end of my nation, I feel like. That kind of sad. And like, not even, probably worse than Jeremiah said, because he didn't want to see Judah go. And I'm pretty much ready for America to go. We've been arrogant for too long.
Jeremiah. That's it. Let's go over to Jeremiah. Are we recording?
Yeah, but it's fine.
Okay. All right. This may be the extra that you can put at the end right here. If I can find the book of Jeremiah.
Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, didn't
Jeremiah 22, starting verse 1. Thus says the Lord, go down to the house of the king of Judah, and there speak this word, and say, hear the word of the Lord, O king of Judah, who sits on David's throne, you and your servants and your people who enter the gates. Thus says the Lord, do justice and righteousness, and deliver the one who has been robbed from the power of his oppressor. Also, do not mistreat or do violence to the stranger or the orphan or the widow, and do not shed innocent blood in this place. For if you men will indeed perform this thing, then kings will enter the gates of this house, sitting in David's place on his throne, riding in chariots and on horses, even the king himself and his servants and his people. But if you will not obey these words, I swear by myself, this is declares the Lord, that this house will become a desolation. What kind of warning do you think God would give us?
Yeah.
If he's given this kind of warning for people that are not doing justice and not doing righteousness. What is that? He defines it right here. Mistreating people, performing violence to the stranger, orphan, widow,
or the innocent.
Or the innocent.
And I would say, we, the prophets of God, essentially, we've been giving the warnings. At some point, God says, you've been warned. Now comes punishment.
Yeah. And a lot of times people can look at this and say, well, what kind of warning would God give the United States of America? Well, I don't even want to give it to that. What kind of warning would God give the world today for all the injustice that's being done?
Yeah.
Globally, the abortions that are taking place. Globally, the mistreatment of immigrants. Globally, the mistreatment of women. What kind of warning would God give us to people that are innocent?
Yeah.
I think it'd be, well, he would certainly warn us, and he does through his word, this house will become a desolation.
Right.